My avatar materialized in front of my locker on the second floor of my high school, the exact spot where I had been standing when I had logged out the night before. I glanced up and down the hallway. My virtual surroundings looked almost, but not quite, real. Everything inside the oasis was beautifully rendered in 3 dimensions. Unless you pulled focus and stopped to examine your surroundings more closely, it was easy to forget that everything you were seeing was computer generated. And that was with my crappy school-issued Oasis console. I had heard that if you accessed the simulation with a new state-of-the-art immersion rig, it was almost impossible to tell the Oasis from reality. I touched my locker door and it popped open with a soft metallic click. The inside was sparsely decorated. A picture of Princess Leia posing with a blaster pistol, a group photo of the members of Monty Python in their Holy Grail costumes, and the James Halliday Time magazine cover. I reached up and tapped the stack of textbooks on the locker's top shelf, and they vanished, then reappeared in my avatar's item inventory. Aside from my textbooks, my avatar had only a few meager possessions: a flashlight, an iron short sword, a small bronze shield, and a suit of banded leather armor. These items were all non-magical and of low quality, but they were the best I could afford. Items in the Oasis had just as much value as the things in the real world, sometimes more, and you couldn't pay for them with food vouchers. The Oasis credit was the coin of the realm, and in these dark times, it was also one of the world's most stable currencies, valued higher than the dollar, pound, euro, or yen. A small mirror was mounted inside my locker door, and I caught a glimpse of my virtual self as I closed it. I'd designed my avatar's face and body to look more or less like my own. My avatar had a slightly smaller nose than me. He was taller, and thinner, and more muscular, and he didn't have all the teenage acne. But aside from these minor details, we looked more or less identical. The school's strictly enforced dress code required that all student avatars be human and of the same gender and age as the student. No giant 2-headed hermaphrodite demon unicorn avatars were allowed. Well, not on school grounds anyways. You could give your Oasis avatar any name you liked, as long as it was unique, meaning you had to pick a name that hadn't already been taken by someone else. Your avatar's name was also your email address and chat ID, so you wanted it to be cool and yet easy to remember. Celebrities had been known to pay huge sums of money to buy an avatar name they wanted from a cyber squatter who had already reserved it. When I had first created my Oasis account, I had named my avatar Wade the Great. After that, I kept changing it every few months, usually to something equally ridiculous. But my avatar had now had the same name for over 5 years. On the day the hunt began, the day I had decided to become a gunter, I had renamed my avatar Percival, after the knight of Arthurian legend who had found the Holy Grail. The other more common spellings of that knight's names, Percival, Percival, had already been taken, but I preferred the name Parsival. Anyway, I thought it had a nice ring to it. People rarely used their real names online. Anonymity was one of the major perks of the Oasis. Inside that simulation, no one knew who you were unless you wanted them to. Much of the Oasis's popularity and culture were built around this fact. Your real name, fingerprints, and retinal patterns were stored in your Oasis account, but gregarious simulation systems kept that information encrypted and confidential. Even GSS's own employees couldn't look up an avatar's true identity. Back when Halliday was still running the company, GSS had won the right to keep every Oasis user's identity private in a landmark Supreme Court ruling. When I'd first enrolled in the Oasis public school system, I was required to give them my real name, avatar name, mailing address, and social security number. That information was stored in my student profile, but only my principal had access to that. None of my teachers or fellow students knew who I really was, and vice versa. Students weren't allowed to use their avatars' names while they were at school. This was to prevent teachers from having to say ridiculous things like, "Pimp grease, pay attention," or "Big Wang 69, would you stand up and give us your report?" Instead, students were required to use their real first names followed by a number to differentiate them from other students with the same name. When I enrolled, there were already 2 other students at my school with the first name Wade, so I'd been assigned the student ID of Wade 3. That name floated above my avatar's head whenever I was on school grounds. The school bell rang, and a warning flashed in the corner of my display, informing me that I had 40 minutes until the start of first period. I began walking my avatar down the hall, using a series of subtle hand motions to control its movements and actions. I could use voice commands to move around, if my hands were otherwise occupied. I strolled in the direction of my world history classroom, smiling and waving to the familiar faces I passed. I was going to miss this place when I graduated in a few months. I wasn't looking forward to leaving school. I didn't have the money to attend college, not even one in the Oasis, and my grades weren't good enough for a scholarship. My only plan after graduation was to become a full-time gunter. I didn't have much choice. Winning the contest was my one chance of escaping the stacks, unless I wanted to sign a 5-year indenturement contract with some corporation, and that was about as appealing to me as rolling around in broken glass in my birthday suit. As I continued down the hallway, other students began to materialize in front of their lockers, ghostly apparitions that rapidly solidified. The sound of chattering teenagers began to echo up and down the corridor. Before long, I heard an insult hurled in my direction. "Hey, hey, if it isn't Wade 3, I heard a voice shout. I turned and saw Todd 13, an obnoxious avatar I recognized from my Algebra 2 class. He was standing with several of his friends. "Great outfit, Slick," he said. "Where did you snag the sweet threads?" My avatar was wearing a black t-shirt and blue jeans, one of the free default skins you could select when you created your account. Like his Cro-Magnon friends, Todd 13 wore an expensive designer skin, probably purchased in some off-world mall. "Your mom bought them for me," I retorted without breaking my stride. "Tell her I said thanks next time you stop at home to breastfeed and pick up your allowance." Childish, I know. But, virtual or not, this was still high school. The more childish an insult, the more effective it was. My jab elicited laughter from a few of his friends and other students standing nearby. Todd 13 scowled and his face actually turned red, a sign that he hadn't bothered to turn off his account's real-time emotion feature, which made your avatar mirror your facial expressions and body language. He was about to reply, but I muted him first, so I didn't hear what he said. I just smiled and continued on my way. The ability to mute my peers was one of my favorite things about attending school online. I took advantage of it almost daily. The best thing about it was that they could see that you muted them, and they couldn't do a damn thing about it. There was never any fighting on school grounds. The simulation didn't allow it. The entire planet of Ludus was a no PvP zone, meaning that no player versus player combat was permitted. At this school, the only real weapons were words, so I'd become skilled at wielding them. I'd attended school in the real world up until 6th grade. It hadn't been very pleasant. I was painfully shy, awkward, with low self-esteem and almost no social skills, a side effect of spending most of my childhood inside the Oasis. Online, I didn't have a problem talking to people or making friends, but in the real world, interacting with other people, especially kids my own age, made me a nervous wreck. I never knew how to act or what to say, and when I did work up the courage to speak, I almost always said the wrong thing. My appearance was part of the problem. I was overweight and had been for a long time. My bankrupt diet of government-subsidized sugar and starch-laden food was contributing, but I was also an Oasis addict, so the only exercise I usually got was running from bullies. To make matters worse, my limited wardrobe consisted entirely of ill-fitting clothes from thrift stores and donation bins. The social equivalent of having a bullseye painted on my forehead. Even so, I tried my best to fit in. Year after year, my eyes would scan the lunchroom like T-1000, searching for a clique that might accept me. But even the other outcasts wanted nothing to do with me. I was too weird, even for the weirdos. And girls? Talking to girls was out of the question. To me, they were like some exotic alien species, both beautiful and terrifying. Whenever I got near one of them, I invariably broke out in a cold sweat and lost the ability to speak in complete sentences. For me, school had been a Darwinian exercise, a daily gauntlet of ridicule, abuse, and isolation. By the time I entered 6th grade, I was beginning to wonder if I'd be able to maintain my sanity until graduation, still 6 long years away. Then, one glorious day, our principal announced that any student with a passing grade point average could apply for a transfer to the new Oasis public school system. The real public school system, the one run by the government, had been underfunded, overcrowded, basically a train wreck for decades. And now, the conditions at many schools had gotten so terrible that every kid with half a brain was being encouraged to stay at home and attend school online. I nearly broke my neck sprinting to the school office to submit my application. It was accepted, and I was transferred to Oasis Public School number 1873 the following semester. Prior to my transfer, my Oasis avatar had never left Incipio, the planet at the center of Sector 1 where new avatars were spawned at the time of their creation. There wasn't much to do on Incipio except chat with other noobs, or shop in one of the giant virtual malls that covered the planet. If you wanted to go somewhere more interesting, you had to pay a teleportation fare to get there, and that cost money, something I didn't have. So my avatar was stranded on Incipio. That is, until my new school emailed me a teleportation voucher to cover the cost of my avatar's transportation to Ludus, the planet where all of the Oasis public schools were located. There were hundreds of school campuses here on Ludus, spread out evenly across the planet's surface. The schools were all identical because the same construction code was copied and pasted into a different location whenever a new school was needed. And since the buildings were just pieces of software, their design wasn't limited by monetary constraints or even by the laws of physics. So every school was a grand palace of learning, with polished marble hallways, cathedral-like classrooms, zero-G gymnasium, and virtual libraries containing every school board approved book ever written. On my first day at OPS 1873, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven. Now, instead of running a gauntlet of bullies and drug addicts on my walk to school each morning, I went straight to my hideout and stayed there all day. Best of all, in the Oasis, no one could tell that I was fat, that I had acne, that I'd worn the same shabby clothes for weeks. Bullies couldn't pelt me with spitballs, give me atomic wedgies, or pummel me by the bike rack after school. No one could even touch me in here. I was safe. When I arrived in my world history classroom, several students were already at their desks. Their avatars all sat motionless with their eyes closed. This was a signal that they were engaged, meaning they were currently on a phone call, browsing the web, or logged into a chat room. It was poor Oasis etiquette to try and talk to an engaged avatar. They usually just ignored you. You'd get an autonomous message telling you to piss off. I took a seat at my desk and tapped the engage icon at the edge of my display. My own avatar's eyes slid shut, but I could see my surroundings. I tapped another icon, and a large two-dimensional web browser window appeared, suspended in space directly in front of me. Windows like this one were visible only to my avatar, so no one could read over my shoulder, unless I let them. My homepage was set to the Hatchery, one of the more popular Gunter message forums. The hatchery's site interface was designed to look and operate like an old pre-internet dial-up bulletin board, complete with the screech of a 300 baud modem during its login sequence. It was very cool. I spent a few minutes scanning the most recent message threads, taking in the latest Gunter news and rumors. I rarely posted anything to the boards, even though I made sure to check them every day. I didn't see much of interest this morning. The usual Gunter clan flame war, ongoing arguments about the correct interpretations of some cryptic passage in Anorak's almanac, high-level avatars bragging about some new magic item or artifact they'd obtained. This crap had been going on for years. In the absence of any real progress, Gunter subculture had become mired in bravado, bullshit, and pointless infighting. It was sad, really. My favorite messages were those devoted to bashing the Sixers. Sixers was a derogatory nickname given to employees of Innovated Online Industries, IOI. IOI was a global communications conglomerate and the world's largest internet service provider. A large portion of IOI's business centered around providing access to the Oasis and on selling goods and services inside it. For this reason, IOI had attempted several hostile takeovers of gregarious simulation systems, all of which had failed. Now they were trying to seize control of GSS by exploiting a loophole in Halliday's will. IOI had created a new department within the company that they called their oology division. Oology was originally defined as the science of studying birds' eggs, but in recent years it had been taken on a second meaning, the science of searching for Halliday's Easter eggs. IOI's oology division had but one purpose: to win Halliday's contest and seize control of his fortune, his company, and the Oasis itself. Like most Gunters, I was horrified at the thought of IOI taking control of the Oasis. The company's PR machine had made its intentions crystal clear. IOI believed that Halliday never properly monetized his creation, and they wanted to remedy that. They would start charging a monthly fee for access to the simulation. They would plaster advertisements on every visible surface. User anonymity and free speech would become a thing of the past. The moment IOI took over, the Oasis would cease to be the open-source virtual utopia I had grown up in. It would become a corporate-run dystopia, an overpriced theme park for wealthy elitists. IOI required its egg hunters, which it referred to as oologists, to use their employee numbers as their Oasis avatars. These numbers were all 6 digits in length, and they also began with the numeral 6, so everyone began calling them Sixers. These days, most Gunters referred to them as Suxors, because they sucked. To become a Sixer, you had to sign a contract stipulating, among other things, that if you found Halliday's egg, the prize would become the sole property of your employer. In return, IOI gave you a bi-monthly paycheck, food, lodging, healthcare, benefits, and a retirement plan. The company also provided your avatar with high-end armor, vehicles, weapons, and covered all of your transportation fares. Joining the Sixers was a lot like joining the military. Sixers weren't hard to spot, because they all looked identical. They were all required to use the same hulking male avatar, regardless of the operator's true gender. They all had close-cropped, dark hair. They all had facial features left by the system default settings. They all wore the same navy blue uniform. The only way to tell these corporate drones apart was by checking the 6-digit employee number stamped on their right breast, just beneath the IOI corporate logo. Like most Gunters, I loathed the Sixers and was disgusted by their very existence. By hiring an army of contract egg hunters, IOI was perverting the entire spirit of the contest. Of course, it could be argued that all the Gunters who had joined clans were doing the same thing. There were now hundreds of Gunter clans, some with thousands of members, all working together to find the egg. Each clan was bound by an ironclad legal agreement stating that if one clan member won the contest, all the members would share the prize. Solos like me didn't care much for clans, but we still respected them as fellow Gunters. Unlike the Sixers, whose goal was to hand Oasis over to an evil multinational conglomerate intent on ruining it. My generation had never known a world without the Oasis. To us, it was much more than a game or an entertainment platform. It had been an integral part of our lives as far back as we could all remember. We had been born into an ugly world, and the Oasis was our one happy refuge. The thought of the simulation being privatized and homogenized by the IOI horrified us in a way that those born before its introduction found difficult to understand. For us, it was like someone threatening to take the sun or sky away. The Sixers gave Gunters a common enemy. The Sixer bashing was a favorite pastime in our forums and chat rooms. A lot of high-level Gunters had a strict policy of killing on sight every Sixer who crossed their path. Several websites were even devoted to tracking Sixer activities and movements, and some Gunters spent more time hunting the Sixers than they did searching for the egg. The bigger clans actually held a yearly competition called 86 the Suxors, with a prize for the clan who managed to kill the largest number of them. After checking a few other Gunter forums, I tapped a bookmark icon on one of my favorite websites, Artie's Missives, the blog of a female Gunter named Artemis. I discovered it about 3 years ago and had been a loyal reader ever since. She posted these great rambling essays about her search for Halliday's egg, which she called a maddening MacGuffin hunt. She wrote with an endearing, intelligent voice, and her entries were filled with self-deprecating humor and witty, sardonic sides. In addition to posting her often hysterical interpretations of passages in the almanac, she also linked to the books, movies, TV shows, and music she was currently studying as part of her Halliday research. I assumed that all these posts were filled with misdirections and misinformation, but they were still highly entertaining. It probably goes without saying that I had a massive cyber crush on Artemis. She occasionally posted screenshots of her raven-haired avatar, and I, sometimes, no, always, saved them to a folder on my hard drive. Her avatar had a pretty face, and it wasn't unnaturally perfect. In the Oasis, you got to see frisky, beautiful faces on everyone, to a point where you're wondering how many of them are really that handsome and beautiful. But Artemis, she didn't look as though she'd been selected from a beauty drop-down menu. Her face had the distinctive look of a real person, as if her true features had been scanned in and mapped onto her avatar. Big hazel eyes, round cheekbones, a pointy chin, and a perpetual smirk. I found her unbearably attractive. Artemis's body was also somewhat unusual. In the Oasis, you usually saw one of two body shapes on females: the absurdly thin yet widely popular supermodel frame, or the top-heavy, wasp-waisted porn starlet physique, which looked even less natural in the Oasis than it did in the real world. But Artemis's frame was short and Rubenesque, all curves. I knew the crush I had on Artemis was both silly and ill-advised. What did I really know about her? She had never revealed her true identity, of course, or her age, or location in the real world. There was no telling what she really looked like. She could be 15 or 50. A lot of Gunters even questioned whether she was even a real girl, but I wasn't one of them. Probably because I couldn't bear the idea that the girl with whom I was virtually smitten might actually be some middle-aged dude named Chuck with back hair and male pattern baldness. In the years since I'd first started reading Artie's Missives, it had become one of the most popular blogs on the internet, now logging several million hits a day. And Artemis was now something of a celebrity, at least in the Gunter circles. But fame hadn't gone to her head. Her writing was still funny and self-deprecating. Her newest blog post was titled The John Hughes Blues, and it was an in-depth treatise of her 6 favorite John Hughes movies, which she divided into 2 separate trilogies. The Dorky Girl Fantasies, 16 Candles, Pretty in Pink, Some Kind of Wonderful, and the Dorky Boy Fantasies, The Breakfast Club, Weird Science, and Ferris Bueller. Just as I had finished reading it, an instant message window popped up on my display. It was my best friend, H. Okay, if you want to split hairs, he was my only friend, not counting Mrs. Gilmore. Top of the morning, amigo. Hola, compadre, I wrote back. What are you up to? Just surfing the turf. You? I asked. Got the basement online. Come and hang out before school, fool. Sweet, I'll be there in a sec, I typed out. I closed the IM window and checked the time. I still had about half an hour until class started. I grinned, tapped a small door icon at the edge of my display, and then selected H's chat room from my list of favorites.